In this video, I'll be talking about a few communication methods and tools that will be very useful during any interview. In an interview, I believe that communication is about as useful as the content that you're actually presenting. From the time that you join B School till the time that the shortlists come out is the ideal time to work on the tips that I'll be sharing with you just now. I believe this for two reasons. Firstly, communication is one of the most powerful things that's going to get you across the line in an interview. And secondly, outside of this time between joining and the shortlist is really the only time you'll have to work on these practices. After that, you'll be far too busy to really work on refining or changing your style of communication. All of the pointers that I'll be sharing over here are provided in much greater detail in the notes provided in the description. I'll be talking about 6 key methods or principles of communication. The first is summarizing. The second is elaborating in points. The third is top-down communication. Fourth is process-driven communication. The fifth is synthesizing and conforming. And sixth and finally, we'll be talking about pausing and pacing your communication. The value of summarizing is that an interview goes on for a very short period and you want to focus on just the most important points and complete succinctly so that the interviewer can also deep dive on what they're more interested in or move forward to another place where you can say something interesting and valuable. There are a couple of principles which make it a little easier. The first is the 80-20 rule. The idea here is that if you have the time to prepare for certain standard answers, ask yourself what are the 20% of sentences which are most valuable and really convey 80% of your story. The second thing you could do is reuse the STAR framework here. By categorizing your answer into the situation and task, the actions, and then the result, what you would be able to do is really identify which of these sentences can easily be shaved off while still maintaining the overall framework that conveys the core message. Elaborating in points is exactly what it sounds like. You start off by calling out your headline that you're giving the audience a number of reasons for a certain belief or a set of activities that you think we should engage in. And then you number out each point as you get into it. Even if you do not know the number of points you're going to make right at the beginning, it helps to call out each point as you go through it so that you're announcing to the audience as and when you've moved on to the next point to at least capture their attention then. The general rule of thumb is not to stray much beyond 3 points because that is the point up till which you have your audience's attention. Top-down communication is one of the most powerful communication tools that you should be equipped with. It builds off of elaborating in points, but is very clearly distinct. In top-down communication, we start off with our insight or something that we've arrived at by analyzing the various details which are available to us. We go answer first, and after that, we announce to the audience that we believe in this insight for multiple reasons, which we will then sequentially elaborate on in points. One key difference here is that in top-down communication, even if you provide just this insight or the answer first, you need not necessarily go into each of the points. However, if you are pushed to justify your insight or belief, you can then elaborate in points to justify why you believe this insight. Process-driven communication is in a sense an alternative to top-down communication. You might use this method of communication in a situation where you either do not have the time to justify your result if you go result first and you think you might get attacked, or if it's important for you to really show your entire thought process before announcing the final result. In this method of communication, what we do is we start off with the context, then run through each of the key actions, then arrive at the result, and then importantly, the so what, the implication or the insight. Now, even here, remember that we are summarizing each of these points. We aren't going through the entire process in detail, but just skimming through the highlights of the process and arriving at the insight. Synthesizing and conforming is a very useful tool when you are the listener in a conversation, which happens often enough. Here, what we do is we capture all of the details, idly taking notes of the important points. From there, we are then able to come up with the insight or the overall synthesis. This is similar to what we do in top-down communication, except here we provide just the insight or the overall answer that we've understood from all of the details we've captured. Importantly, we then confirm with the speaker, is this insight correct or is this really the gist of what you were trying to say to me? And if so, we can then proceed. Pausing and pacing is a very useful tool that you will find. Now, in an interview, you will often be given a lot of questions. Our first instinct is to jump in and try answering it. But if you can develop the habit of pausing as soon as you've been given a question or have been spoken to, it gives you at least a fraction of a second to process better and decide how you're going to attack it. And in the best case, you can also ask for a minute or a couple of seconds time to think about your answer or structure your answer before you get into it. This gives you enough time to really work out a good answer before getting back to the interviewer. Similarly, with your pacing, you have two important benefits. If you slow down your pace just a little bit, you will first of all be clear enough to the interviewer. And secondly, you'll buy yourself a little bit of extra time between words or between sentences to ensure that you're really on track in terms of what you are saying. Each of these 6 methods and tools of communication are easy to understand in theory, but much tougher to put into practice. We're used to communicating the way in which we do, and to make that conscious shift takes conscious effort, and only after a lot of effort does it become subconscious. Therefore, I would strongly recommend, from the time you join B School all the way up until your shortlists, and beyond if you can, keep practicing this at every chance that you get. Some of these chances are in class while you're participating in answering questions, while talking to your friends, or really any time that you're communicating with anyone. This might sound a little bit forced and artificial, but you'll find that a lot of these methods of communication fit in fairly naturally, depending on which tool you pick and for which context. And that is also why in the interview, each of these tools will fit in fairly well, and you'll understand later on which ones really fit where. All of these methods of communication that we spoke about are available in much greater detail, as are the other topics covered in this video series, all in the notes available in the description. If this video or other videos in the series seem relevant and useful to you, do remember to like, share, and subscribe.